Unfiltered.
Like you're in another world, like you zoned out. You know what I'm saying?
Hello and welcome to Unfiltered with Georgii Speakman. I want to welcome today's guest, Maija Ehlinger, who is a very talented and seasoned storyteller, Emmy-Award-winning producer and journalist who has a history in covering international affairs, business, politics, economics, and the technology industry. She's currently serving as editor-in-chief with Hypepotamus, who we've had the opportunity and pleasure of working with historically. So thank you so much, Maija, for
Yeah.
giving us a voice in industry. And in that capacity, she's currently covering all startup activity in the Southeast, along with venture capital and innovation hubs. So welcome to the show. Happy Friday. Happy 404 day.
Thanks. Great to be here, Georgie. Really, honored to join you today.
I know. I'm so glad to have you on the show, babe. I've just been watching you and reading all your incredible work for so long now. And again, grateful for having had the opportunity to be a part of Hypotamus. Outside of your incredible education with Emory and Columbia, journalism and all the rest, how did you get your big break in journalism? What were some of the drivers and motivators for sort of spearheading the industry?
Sure. I have a unique way that I got into journalism, which is actually
Tell us.
which is actually entrepreneurial in its
Nice.
origin. While I was at Emory in undergrad, I worked at the time, which I feel like I'm dating myself a bit, but at the time I was working for the Office of Marketing and Communications for the university, and Emory was launching its first YouTube series, which was very
Nice.
innovative
Yeah.
innovative at the time. And so I helped bring the first student-led content to life, so that we had weekly kind of roundups of the news on campus. We did interview series with professors on campus. And so I was working as a producer and an editor for these shows, but it was really an entrepreneurial endeavor. At the end of the day, we were creating a new series of content for the university. So that's where I learned my love of storytelling, my love of writing and content in the world of journalism. That was my first introduction to it. But it also, I didn't realize it at the time, but it really gave me an insight into what entrepreneurship, at least on the media side, really looks like.
That's incredible. I love that. I love that it was sort of like an organic entry point as you're still sort of like, leaning into your qualifications and all the rest. You're an Emmy award-winning producer. How did that come about? And what are you an Emmy award-winning producer for exactly?
Yeah, so I worked for CNN International, which was a great time in my life,
Yeah, I bet.
and was working on the international breaking news team, which is big team here in Atlanta. And then, of course, we helped bring content from around the world to life with, CNN is, of course, known for its international breaking news. And so I was on the team for many of the big stories
Wow.
of our time. So COVID, and then most recently, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So that's one of the stories that I worked on.
I just got chills. So, well, congratulations on the award, because it's no easy fate. And obviously working at CNN is just such an incredible experience, would have exposed you to so much. What was probably your favorite project or story, to work on throughout that time?
Yeah, I always say that, that period of working there and then freelancing with the team, it's so different than what I do with Hypepotamus. And because there, you're working on international breaking news stories. So earthquakes, war, invasions, famine,
Casual things, the
yeah,
casual
just
occurrences around the world.
yeah, protests. And so, it's that time I learned so much about as what it means to be a journalist, to create things on not just like deadline, but stories that need to be fact checked and correct right away because they have
Yes.
implications for how people are thinking about the world, viewing the world. But you're ultimately so many times working on stories that you're interviewing people, you're talking to people on their absolute worst day, which is,
Mm.
of course, you're telling important stories, but it's so different than being in the world of covering entrepreneurs.
Mm.
And so I, they're very different and important in different ways. But to be able to step away from saying this is seeing the worst of humanity
Right.
in so many ways, to be able to say, oh, I'm actually seeing the best of humanity and the best of what entrepreneurial spirit, what that looks like, is quite refreshing as a journalist.
I can imagine. And it would have been very intimidating at times to break some of these stories and work on some of these projects. What was perhaps one of the most confronting experiences and things that you had to work on or fact check or just be a part of throughout that
Yeah,
time?
working with the team on the ground, I was here
Mhm.
in Atlanta in the newsroom, but working with the team on the Russian invasion of Ukraine was certainly something that's very haunting. And
Yes, I can
being
imagine.
those first few days, we CNN had some incredible teams on the ground, and to be part of that support system for them here as a newsroom was
Mhm.
it was an honor, but it was also something that is, the images and everything like that are haunting. And yeah.
Unbelievable. I can't imagine. I can my only connectivity points to the Ukraine is I used to manage a very talented creator who's Ukrainian, and so
Mm,
she, when the Web3, when it all was happening, she was actually producing a lot of NFTs to raise
yeah.
like funds and stuff for the Ukraine. My sister-in-law is half Ukrainian, her father's
Oh,
Ukrainian.
oh my gosh,
And then
wow.
one of my favorite contractors that I engage from time to time on different projects is based in the Ukraine. And it happened recently where I'm like, hello, are you still there? I need you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. We just had all these things take place and unfold. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We had all these warnings, da 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 da, and like a bomb just went off here and whatever, and impact. I'm like, oh my god, I feel so, I feel so bad. I feel so awful. Like even in like trying to engage, I'm like, is there anything that I can do to support you through this process? Is like, yeah, keep giving me work. We need the work. I need the work. I'm just like, just obviously let me know if it's an inappropriate time. Like it's just a weird
Yeah.
dynamic, right? To have to,
Yeah,
yeah.
you bring up such a great point, and it's something that I didn't even know with uh, well, in Hypepotamus, in this role as editor, how many, it wasn't until the war broke out, I wasn't aware of how many startups in Atlanta in the Southeast have teams that are in Ukraine. And,
Offshore teams, yeah.
and it's like just
Mhm,
the sheer, even startups that are truly Atlanta based and proud
mhm,
Atlanta based,
mhm.
their tech teams, their development
Right,
teams are so often, we live in such a
offshore.
global world, and that just really highlighted what that looked like.
Mhm. I definitely wanna get into more of the local community that you cover with Hypotamus. Hannibal AI, even as a startup here in Atlanta, we've got 100% onshore, like in market teams, but
Wow.
I just have this one person over there. But yes, there's so many teams that have offshore, sorry, so many companies that have offshore teams, and it's just weird to have to sort of like think about these things that that you want to say wouldn't imagine happening in the States, but there's always the musings. Is World War III going to break out? How's that going to impact the States and all
Yeah.
the things? But still so fascinated with your time at CNN. You mentioned, you covered COVID. One of the reasons why I left LA, where I was, nearly where I was residing for nearly 8 years, was because, a number of different things, including wanting to buy a home and all the things. And LA's real estate market being insanely ridiculous. But
Yeah.
LA really did turn into an apocalyptic zone throughout that time. There were like tens of dozens of helicopters going overhead
Mm.
all night long, 24/7. Obviously, some of the biggest protests in the country, just so many looting, shootings, riots, all the rest. Tell us about your experience in covering COVID. And was it here in market? Was it across the country? Tell us more about that and some of the wild experiences that you faced throughout that time as well.
Yeah, so I've been based in Atlanta since 2010.
Hmm.
Actually, from born and raised in just outside of Los Angeles. So I well didn't experience COVID back there. That's
Yeah,
my home.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I at the time, was transitioning between. COVID was the time that I was transitioning between CNN and Hypepotamus, and so in both worlds, I was covering the impact of COVID. Of course, the spread from an international disease to an international crisis,
hmm,
and then on eventually on the on hype side, we're
mm,
our goal and our focus is, how do we cover not just cover the local scene, but give resources to people. And
yeah,
so, at that time, it was like we had startups that, just were pivoting to try to survive. They were, you know, figuring
yes.
out whatever they could do in the same way that we all
Mine was one
were
of
in.
them out of LA
Yeah,
though. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
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 and I think that was the most fascinating thing for
mm,
me to come into hype at that time, at really the very, height of COVID, and
hmm,
say, okay, this is really, the story of there's always eras and themes throughout the business community, and at
for
that
sure.
time, it was what what does survivability look like? And startups are so good at thinking about that, but
Yeah,
this really put it into a new
yes.
level.
So interesting. I can imagine like being responsible for covering stories, breaking stories with a major mainstream network like CNN was quite different to a lot of the narratives and the speculation and the assumptions and things. Short form, DIY, self-generated content on social media. What was
Mhm.
that like? Experiencing, witnessing, seeing that comparative difference between making sure that you're getting the stats and facts and all the things right through the CNN world and ecosystem versus like managing and monitoring and observing some of the stories on the ground from like the everyday human and creator.
Sure, CNN is so massive.
Mhm.
So we had, specific teams that are working on health that have all of that experience. So, you know, at the time, our goal was, how do we tell the story of the international impact it's having
Mhm.
on different countries?
Mhm.
Which
Mhm.
countries are shutting down?
Yeah.
What does that look like? So,
Right.
it's such a team effort, and that was a great, I don't want to say a great learning experience from a purely journalistic experience.
Sure.
And it was also the first time that the newsroom had gone remote. That was not
Mm.
at all a
No.
concept of working from home. It was all in
Yeah.
the big, giant newsroom. And so that was such a shift. And then, there was also, we see it more and more now, but so, we're in this world of just user generated content and what's true, what's false. It's something that we also saw with Hypopotamus. It was how, what are the things that are driving people and in this time, and like, how do you look at user generated content? How do you look at what content businesses are putting out and say, is this real? Is
Right.
this factual? Is this something that's worth reporting on?
Right.
Because anyone can say anything online. And so the role of journalists is, how do you pull the thread a little bit and say where's truth and where's
Yes,
kind of ground
exactly.
truth?
Where is truth for sure? Yeah, big question and a lot to navigate there because it's sort of, yeah, it's just a convoluted and massive ecosystem with the explosion of social media over the last 15 plus years. It's just like, monitoring all of that and yeah,
Yeah.
sourcing and finding the truth amidst everything. Um, yeah, you've obviously been operating the Atlanta market for a while now. What amidst your transition from a major network like CNN into more of a boutique outlet like Hypopotamus, what is your take on some of the changes of the social media landscape, but more importantly, the media landscape in which you've been a part of now for quite some time? What's changed that you feel has been positively versus perhaps negatively impactful? What does that look like?
Yeah, I coming into Hypepotamus, it was a really awesome opportunity for me, and what really pulled me in and I was like, this is I'm really passionate about is this movement of local news. And so, of
Mhm.
course, for the last, gosh, probably decades, I don't know when we can pinpoint it, there's been kind of just this, if you follow any the news about the media,
Mhm.
you know that local papers were closing down, were getting bought up by big private equity firms,
Right.
were shutting down shop. And you saw broad level, you saw the erosion of local news and what the
Mhm.
impact of that would be.
Mhm.
No one covering City Hall in lots of places around the country.
Mm.
No one holding local governments accountable.
Mm.
And so people think, okay, well, of course you have to have, you know, your news politics out of Washington and you got to have the latest news out of there. But your our daily lives are so much more are so impacted by what's happening on a local
Yeah.
government level, and that's from our personal lives. If you're a business owner, a lot of the decisions that are made locally impact you just as much as what's happening in Washington. And so there's really been an interesting push from a national level to
Mhm.
make local news more impactful. And so I think there's a lot of great examples in Atlanta. A point to Rough Draft kind of having this reemergence of saying, instead of just being hyper local papers, being this kind of overarching news organization. You're seeing more beat specific publications as well,
Yeah.
Hypopotamus being one of them. And so I think we know where to find audience now.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's where people, yeah, are online, where the people that you want to reach are on different outlets. And so now it's a really, for me, an interesting and refreshing time to be in local news because you can
I love
have such
that.
a great impact
Yeah.
on the community you're in, and you're not just doing what's commonly known as parachute journalism, going in
Mhm.
for a day and getting out. That's what I love about Hype, and that's what I think is the big opportunity with local news, is being in kind of really ingrained in the community, because you can tell better stories that way.
Mhm. Oh, I am blown away by the quality of stories and the content and information that comes from the platform. Hype. Super appreciative of the coverage you've provided us as like startups, both clients and Hannibal AI, for example. On that note, what is your take and what has been the business's take on the emergence of AI and its specific impact on storytelling, writing, and just journalism in general?
Sure. I think it's funny when I get to talk about AI, because so much of my to day reporting is on
Right.
AI now,
Yeah.
just by nature of
Yeah. Industry.
a a there's so many AI companies in
Hmm.
Atlanta and the Southeast. There's also a lot of companies claiming to be AI companies that are
Not
in the
quite there
Southeast.
yet.
That there's a lot of so that's from a pure editorial perspective. So much of my day is spent on trying to understand what is the unique um, platform that the
Mhm.
Southeast has, and kind of who are the startups that are driving AI innovation, what companies are using AI in a unique and interesting way to grow.
Mhm.
So that's kind of on the editorial side. And then, of course, as editor for Hype, we have to also continue to grow our audience. We have to continue to refine our business,
Mhm.
the way that we get our content out to the right people. And so, of course, AI is going to be part of that topic. And so, it's important for us as a journalistic platform. None of the writing that goes out, that is all reporter generated.
Right.
We don't use AI for that, and the reason is, a we believe we have a unique voice and
Absolutely.
can create that. But also AI can be we use AI tools in different ways.
Mhm.
Where we experiment with once we write the story, we want people to read the story. What is going to get them to read it? So,
Right.
can we use AI to have better SEO meta tags? Can we use AI to actually get into AI search engines so
Mhm.
more people find us? Can we A/B test headlines and things like that? And so that's not unique to us. That's a big conversation in the world of journalism, saying we don't want AI to replace the job of a journalist, but we
Yeah.
do want AI as a tool for creating, getting our content out, and kind of finding the right people and creating that um, better bridge between journalist and audience.
No, I love that. I love that so much. It's cool to know that you're kind of from the West Coast, because I always say, like, I grew up in LA, New York as a foreigner. And obviously, as I'm sure you can appreciate, it's pretty night and day. I mean, granted, I was working in the intersection of tech, entertainment, talent brands, new media,
Yeah,
and then making the transition to Atlanta for a number of different reasons, such as at the time it was pegged as like the fourth fastest growing tech scene in the country, fourth fastest growing real estate scene. It has beautiful nature. We've got the development of the Beltline. I've been lucky enough to purchase a home just off the southeast side trail of the Beltline. And
nice.
so it's sort of one of the last legs to get developed, and all
Yeah,
the rest. And then
you got in at the right time then.
yeah, yeah, I hope so. I hope so. But since being here, having the opportunity to continue to work with different startups, a lot interstate still, but then obviously some local, and obviously joining Hannibal AI. In your opinion and what you've seen, what are some of the incredible opportunities that you're seeing emerge in the sort of tech innovation, venture capital sort of spaces in the Southeast, and in particular Atlanta?
Yeah, I think I'll start with Atlanta. I think since COVID, we've seen, of course, the influx of new talent
Yeah,
in, and which, yeah, as
hello.
you're a prime example of. And with that, we've seen a lot of West Coast or Northeast venture capital
Mm,
firms, whether they're opening an office or more likely having a team, having one person or two people down here searching for
mm,
talent.
right.
There's a understanding of great companies being built here, having having been established here, and it being a good place to grow or to
For
start a
sure.
business.
Yeah.
Um, I think Atlanta's success has um, always had a little bit, the ground of Atlanta's startup and technology scene it has been, in the corporate world. We've always had these great corporate innovators that have helped spun out startups, but
Right.
it's also has had an entrepreneurial scene forever. I think, people I'll hear from time to time people say, "Oh, Atlanta startup scene is just growing or just starting." And it's like, no, no, no. It's been here for generations. Some of the biggest software and hardware
Yes.
companies started here
Yeah.
in the 50s and the
Yeah.
60s. So, we're seeing this, it's a continuous growth opportunity.
Right.
And what I'm seeing right now in Atlanta, which is very refreshing, is a movement to say, let's combine forces and really showcase what Atlanta is all about
Hmm.
instead of it just being known as a fintech world to people that are in finance, or just known as a cyber security hub for those in this world, saying, how can we tell the story of Atlanta better so that, you're seeing that from the mayor's office, from Invest Atlanta, from
Hmm.
all the ecosystem
Hmm.
hubs. And so I think kind of that movement to say, let's have an overarching narrative about the strength of Atlanta's ecosystem, I think is important. Not just saying that, there's a great startup ecosystem here. It's saying, hey, these are all the resources and these are all the
Hmm.
strengths we have.
Hmm. For sure. That's a great bloody answer. I think this city and state is home to some of the largest enterprise corporations in the country, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then
Um, one of the largest concentrations of Fortune 500s,
Yes.
and those Fortune 500s have created brought up talent that have gone on to create some huge B2B brands,
Hmm.
but also they're largely invested in the ecosystem, whether that's in hiring from Georgia Tech or helping with accelerators and venture studios
Hmm.
across the state.
And are you seeing an increase in subscriber base from interstate markets in some of the largest cities?
Yeah, which is really exciting for us. Our we started in Atlanta. We now cover the whole Southeast region.
Yes.
So
It's
big
awesome.
markets being Charlotte,
Yeah.
Raleigh, Durham,
Yeah.
Nashville, Tampa. But I get to see the subscribers as they come in, and it's always great when I see there's a huge influx from California. You will get, a big influx from
That's
New
great.
York. So, and we don't do marketing to those areas specifically, but people find us. It's a lot of
Mhm.
VCs, and then
Mhm.
I'll also get people who just organically reach out and say, "Hey, I'm moving from SF to Atlanta, and I found you guys, or I was told about Hype." So yeah, there's just kind of an organic growth as
For sure.
people look to the Southeast as a major player regionally, and then this bigger cities as kind of places to look for tech talent or for business opportunities.
Yeah, I was really stoked to hear recently. I went up to New York to visit an Australian girlfriend. We went on a little Caribbean trip together recently, and she just actually mentioned that her whole firm, which is in the finance sort of asset management space, involved with a lot of government projects and all the rest. Their biggest focus is the Southeast, and it's
Oh,
just like
cool.
Atlanta, 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 constantly on the tip of their tongue, which is awesome. And then seeing the growth of a lot of the data centers and other bits and pieces, of course, is like film and TV. And I was just sharing actually recently that I had dinner with a friend. There's a partner in a talent management firm out of LA, and he said it's back to business where 90% of the production is outside of Los Angeles, and the
Yeah.
largest portion of that is here in Atlanta. So it's great to see a lot of these sort of scenes, industry sectors coming together or merging or coming out of Atlanta and Southeast. So I can imagine you're going to be a hell of a lot busier in like the coming months,
That's what we
years.
want.
Yeah, for sure. What areas in terms of sector and industry growth are you seeing the most of through your journalistic efforts?
Sure. One area of technology and innovation that continues to floor me just in terms of the sheer breadth and depth of talent in town is the medtech,
Yes.
bio tech, life sciences community.
Yeah.
I think every time I start talking to someone or peeling, I feel like I'm just peeling back an onion and realizing just how big of an
Mm,
industry, whether you're talking medical devices
mm,
or life sciences companies.
mm,
So
mm,
I'm always impressed by
mhm.
the groundswell, and we're seeing now with tech, with Science Square coming up near Tech
Yes.
Square, that
Yeah.
intersection of kind of life sciences and the technology world here is is exciting. I think that's a great opportunity for the research institutions that are
Mhm, mhm,
in the city and the state.
mhm.
So always impressed by when I continue to learn about the biotech world here. Um, Atlanta is, of course, always going to be high on the list of B2B startups. And for me, that's particularly interesting in the world we live in now. Um, depending on where depending on the day in 2025, it's a tough market and potentially is going to continue to be tough. And so these companies that are focused on B2B automation, I think have a really unique opportunity right now. And so hopefully we'll see some big winners out of Atlanta in terms of helping companies navigate doing more with less, which they've had to do for a long time. And unfortunately, I think we'll continue to have to do more with less
Yeah.
as we look on the horizon here.
For sure. I agree with you that there are so many amazing businesses and ecosystems, micro ecosystems that are sort of like emerging out of the woodworks and all the rest. This might be partly my experience, but I've definitely heard this observation from many, many others before, just because out of pure curiosity. And again, when I say like growing up in LA, New York, you get accustomed to a certain culture and style of business. And obviously LA / the entertainment industry or tech scene on the West Coast, granted, is quite sort of different from other pockets of the country for sure. And even the way people network between LA and New York is sometimes a little bit different too. And so obviously it was a night and day experience, which I'm sure you've experienced some of that too, coming from the West Coast to the South. There, in my opinion, and of course this is just my opinion, but again, I've heard this common sort of observation from a lot of people as well. There still seems to be a lot of like separation or like lack of integration with a bunch of the different scenes in business and all the rest. What's your take on that? And also, you know, it has a lot to do with probably the South's history. There's that, but there's a lot of just mass exodus individuals coming from out of state and contributing to the local entrepreneurial scene and culture, and then just might be doing their own thing or have the main head office in another city state, but tentacle, as you said earlier, in Atlanta. Therefore, their focus might actually not necessarily be directly on the Atlanta market, but they still have a presence here. How do we increase more integration, awareness, inclusion, all the things with the local business communities, from like family offices to city-state bodies to local government politics, entrepreneurs, startups, like all the things, as well as the big enterprise corporations? I feel like they're all their micro little sort of scenes and operations, but how do we get more like inclusion and awareness and things like that? Because you're obviously already doing a great job, but just holistically, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, you know, I think it's fascinating, and it's the big crux of the problem that I think you hear people in the ecosystem talk about, and particularly ecosystem builders. You know, there's been a movement over the last several years to say, you know, we have these great hubs. When you think about the Tech Village, you think about the Russell Center,
Yes.
ATDC, you
Yeah.
have
And
all
then
these
like
great,
Portal Innovation. It's Portal Innovations, right? Which
yes,
is just
yeah,
an incredible space. And to your point about the growth in life sciences, I mean, that and
it's a
Science
whole,
Village. Yeah.
it's like a whole new part of the
Yeah.
city that has
Yeah.
popped up.
Yeah.
And so there's been a movement to say, you know, what does it look like to make sure people know about these resources,
Mhm.
particularly as more and more people move to the Southeast in general, Atlanta specifically, saying, you know, there are business resources here for you to, whether you're going to start your business or you're going to up and move your business here for
Right.
other things. You know, there's I'll point to some like efforts that are going on there. You know, I think some of it is you'll see through this. If anyone if you follow the tech scene at all here, you've probably heard this push to make Atlanta a top 5 tech hub. That is a movement by kind of this, it's a citywide
Yes.
initiative, and so that is really, to me, a proof that there's a movement to say, hey, let's make sure we're bringing all the resources together, and so people can understand how big Atlanta's ecosystem is right now. Because if you know, when I'll just say, you know, when I came in as a reporter covering it, I had no idea how massive the ecosystem was. I was familiar with ATV, was familiar with ATDC, but did not know kind of the scope of it. You know, so I would say that's kind of, you need an overarching movement from a metro Atlanta
Yes.
world. You know, I'll point to some people that are doing a great job on the corporate side. Of course, when you talk about corporate innovation, you have to talk about Engage and Tech Square. You know, the great work that they have done in terms of bringing the biggest corporate enterprise players together to help startups. So, you know, those type of models are so important when you think
Yes.
about, you know, I I'll say personally, I don't think that there's so much push in the startup world to create billion-dollar companies. I'm not always sure that's the metric that an ecosystem should work for, or an individual founder should specifically work for.
Right.
But there's that, when you think about, okay, if we do want to create that next billion-dollar company, it's that support level at the very beginning to say,
Yes.
we can
Round up.
you can yeah, you can have the resources here, but then also having the resources to go from an early stage to a growth stage to a full-blown enterprise.
Mhm.
We have to have that
Mhm.
support system here.
Mhm. For sure. And I'm super excited to see what the guys at Soto, like Atlanta Ventures, are carving out and working on aggressively now, which is the startup city, South
Yeah.
downtown, all the development through there. What's your take on that initiative? And how do you see that working out for a lot of the startups that might still be struggling now and today to get access to capital and struggling to pay the bills month after month? How do we continue to nurture those that type of ecosystem where they might end up having to be faced with paying, I don't know, a lot of rent if in these new spaces? Like, how do you foresee that unfolding? Because I do know that that's sort of been a amusing and sort of conversation around the like early stage startup sort of circles, and how we can make that work.
Sure. I'm so intrigued and fascinated by what's happening in South
Yeah,
Downtown. I work out of there from time to time. I think the building is and what they're doing, and most importantly, the team they have behind them is
for
really
sure.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Um, uh, so yes, the team that they have building is really great. I'm excited for them to see that. I think whenever you think about, can startups continue to get the resources and the rent they need in all of these places? It's about getting critical mass of people into an area, and
mhm,
then being able to say, can we give you the resources you need, and support you at a price point that you
right.
can afford? So,
Yeah,
um, I think that's kind of, it will be interesting to see how that unfolds. I think
for
there's a lot
sure.
of other pockets around the city that are saying,
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
how do we bring startups, startup founders, whatever level they are at, into the same building to create serendipitous
Mhm.
conversations? We had, I don't know if people know this, but Hypepotamus actually started as a co-working space back in the day in the
No,
Biltmore.
I didn't even know
And
that. Forgive me
yeah,
for not knowing that, but that's amazing. I love that.
yeah, so started in the Biltmore, kind of
Beautiful.
to
Gorgeous
create.
hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. And what they're doing there now, they're trying to revive the startup
Yes.
landscape and bring startups in
Yeah,
town there. So all that to say, there's an importance of having startups in in
for
spaces
sure.
together.
Yeah,
Um, and whether that's a co-working, a hot desk, an individual desk, we need to be able, or I should say we, an ecosystem needs to be able to support entrepreneurs in all their facets, whether they're
yeah,
sitting down ideating an idea for the first time, or they've got, if they need space for R&D, they need space to bring teams together. That's, it's a unique challenge post COVID when people have
right.
teams everywhere. But seeing these pockets of, seeing how South Downtown is doing it, seeing how places around Tech Square are doing that, even up in Curiosity Lab and Tech Park, in the suburbs,
Yeah.
are creating intentional spaces for entrepreneurs. It is just so important for any stage company.
Absolutely, I hear you on all of that. No, it's very, very exciting what we're facing as a city, and I truly hope once the Beltline is completed and all that kind of stuff, that yeah, I mean, we've got major events around the corner, such as World Cup, which is really
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
What's your take on how that's going to impact local business, enterprise, tourism, citywide initiatives, and also like startup community, major brands, all the things, and how it's all going to hopefully come together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, what is it, 400 days? I believe I saw something to
Oh,
that,
really is a
to that,
countdown.
there's a countdown I've seen.
Right.
Um, and um, yeah, I think there are, and I'll point to the Business Chronicle and AJC are doing some great
Yes,
reporting on kind of what
for
that
sure.
looks like on from a ecosystem level. What,
Mhm.
of course, Hype, we focus on the tech side of it. But, I think what's also great is you're seeing these movements, Heart of South Downtown, a great new initiative saying, how do we make sure that we're bringing not just people downtown for events, but how are we creating a community of and a business community that people want to be there, not just when the flashy, World Cup lights are happening. How do we say, these are enterprises that want to stake a claim,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we make sure that we support those businesses? And I think what's I'll paraphrase what they're doing, and I hope I do it justice. But in order to create a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem, you need to have places for people to live nearby. You need places, you need the services and the restaurants and the things that create a strong community. You can't just have office buildings that people come to and leave,
Right.
not in this day and age. And so, it's a whole ecosystem building effort.
It is.
In downtown, but then, around the city,
For
if we
sure.
want to support entrepreneurs, we have to support building a more livable city.
Mm-hmm. Agree with that for sure. But I think Atlanta's doing an incredible job with, the Beltline is just mind blowing. Like I can't believe that project originated from a university, project originally and all the rest. So kudos to that entire initiative and project, and can't wait to see it completed. It's going to be interesting to see how long it takes to get around the whole city on a bike or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, like it's really helping nurture the true culture of Atlanta, connecting suburbs and communities and cities and all the rest. So very much looking forward to seeing all of that come to fruition. So many more questions on all of the things, but I'm very curious, like for all the budding journalists out there and all the rest, what advice would you have to give to kick off a media and journalistic career in today's landscape, knowing there's been like so many changes to the industry?
Gosh, yeah. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the industry that's hard to avoid. I know so many talented producers, editors, writers who are out of work, and that's a tough reality. So for people that are looking into being a journalist, I would just say remember that it's important. There's a reason why you tell stories, and I would advise anyone who wants to go into journalism to start with your figuring out why you want to tell stories.
Sure.
And what are the stories that resonate most with you. For me, I've just fallen in love with the business community because
we need you. We need you. Don't go anywhere. Yeah.
It's a way to say, for me, the reason I love business journalism specifically is that when you think about, whether it's you or your family member, it's people, the main thing people are talking about every day is, what did you do at work? And then thinking about, how are we going to make rent? How are we going to pay bills? All of these things. It's business drives, every decision we make in this world. So to be able to help share the stories of people that are building those businesses. So I would say start and figure out the types of stories you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then my big piece of advice is don't get tied to a platform for many reasons. And that probably is advisable to many people.
That's interesting advice. I wouldn't have thought of that, but sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So I think we see this, we saw this with Twitter. So many journalists have built their followings on Twitter. I used to live on Twitter in probably an unhealthy amount. It's
still in recovery.
Yeah, still in recovery from the staring at the little tweets. But you can't rely on one platform to be the place where you're creating your media, getting your media out. You never know when if you would have told me 5 years ago that Twitter would be a ghost town compared to where it was, I wouldn't have believed you. But we wouldn't have, there's now journalists who are building great platforms on Blue Sky, but how long will Blue Sky last?
Right.
So just don't get tied to a specific platform, but then also don't get tied to a specific format. I think for me, I've been in video, I've done broadcast, I've done writing, I've done kind of more of the social media sort of journalism. You have to learn how to do it all. And I think journalists who have been able to pivot and say, yes, I was in broadcasting, but I can do in linear journalism, but I can pivot and I can do quick digital content. That's going to be important. So, I think at the end of the day, it's, if you know how to tell a story, you should be able to tell it in all different platforms and know how to tell it correctly on all different platforms. Don't pigeonhole yourself and just say, I'm just a writer. I'm just going to do long form articles, because that's, you're going to lose a lot of opportunities to find different niches within the journalism world.
That is excellent advice. So you're really talking about, staying curious amidst your own craft and interest, but the importance of having resilience, agility, adaptability, flexibility, which is actually qualities and characteristics unbelievably needed, required for the entrepreneurial journey. But you've got to really have that in pretty much life these days to survive. How dichotomous it can be by nature, forever changing. I mean, the explosion of DIY. I mean, the list goes on, but I think that's really great advice to encourage those qualities in future journalists. But then you also touched on, it's funny because depending on the world, and I agree with you, you really do need to be sort of adaptable, flexible with some of these platforms and sort of not get too attached to them. That try and exist fruitfully across all of them. But depending on which sort of sectors, industries, or sides of the fence you're on, others will say, select just one, maybe two platforms and just live there and do those really well, whether it is X, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. But I hear you from your side of the fence. Like, you've really got to show up in, consistently, intelligently, well informed across those different platforms, because content isn't always going to cross pollinate as well.
Yeah. I wish it would, but
right, I know. You just want to be able to copy and paste. See you later. Thanks for coming. Throw in a couple of hashtags and hope for it to do its thing.
That would make our day easier. But
yeah. And so, actually, on that note, if you don't mind me asking, when it comes to like journalism, crafting stories, narratives, all the things, how would you sort of break down each of these platforms, the important platforms, and the types of sort of tone of voice that you really want or should have across these different platforms, because they're all quite different?
And this is something we're always experimenting with, so probably catch me in a few weeks and I'll have a different answer, but right. I'll speak to it.
Forever changing.
Forever changing. But for us, we've found that our most successful platform is LinkedIn, which makes sense for we're serving the business community. That is where the business community lives. And so we're constantly trying out different content for, what resonates on LinkedIn, right. Mm-hmm. Which, is fascinating, because for us, we're whenever you post an article on a platform, there is a chance that people read the blurb and never click on your site, which for us, the name of the game is eyeballs on your site. That's what we're here for. And so it's such a unique marketing problem in journalism of, we want to get the story out and we want people to engage on these platforms, but then please click on the article. How do we get you to click on it?
Click. How do we?
And read the story.
And then share it, and then share and comment and all the things. Yeah.
All the things. So, I think you have to pick specific metrics that you care about. Mm-hmm. For us, we've really been, how can we grow our LinkedIn base? How do we create LinkedIn specific content so that we say, all right, even if people aren't going to go on to the website and click on that article, can them being a subscriber to our or follower of our LinkedIn page and our new LinkedIn newsletter, can that be their source for all things hype? And we know, they've got everything that they need. So even if they're scrolling, they're going to see the quality content that they need in their news feed there.
Right. Yeah. God, yeah, full of gems. Thank you so much, Maija. I could ask you a million more questions, but respectful of your time and day. And I think you've just imparted so much great wisdom, knowledge, and perspective on the Southeast, journalism as an entire industry and career, and all the things. Did you have any other imparting sort of gems, wisdom, thoughts that you want to sort of leave any listener with today?
Ooh, that's cool. What gems do I want to share?
Yeah.
There was something that you said earlier that just kind of like a light bulb of a conversation I had recently with another journalist friend, when you said, what we were talking about, how you need an entrepreneurial mindset in so many things. And so
Yes.
I do think
Yeah.
a lot of what journalism is entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I would so agree with that.
Yeah, every story is a mini project, is a mini product you're shipping out. So every time you're iterating, saying, okay, how can I improve how I did that interview? How can I improve the way that I formatted everything? So thinking of it as kind of individual products, and then kind of as like a mini entrepreneurial thing.
Absolutely.
I'll say that. I'll also say, talking to a journalistic friend, should you be in the tech world and you have an opportunity to hire a journalist or a former journalist, do it. People who know how to work on deadline, know how to create an impactful story.
Yes.
I know many journalists who have moved into the operations world.
Right.
Who
That
have
makes a lot of
moved
sense.
into the natural thing is people move into PR. But I would say people that are in media and kind of the overall world of journalism make good operators. And so just a plug for people in the tech world, that if and or for journalists who are looking for kind of their next career path, journalists are scrappy and can really help startups in different ways outside of just writing content for them.
I love that. And I think that is such golden advice. Like, I couldn't agree more. That's really bang on. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot out of that for sure. Particularly some of the sub industries, whether it's comms, PR, to your point, and others that are related, connected to journalism, or very much interconnected. It's so many of those areas are changing. Even the PR model is changing. You've got pay for play models. You've got all these different things happening and unfolding. So again, like, having that entrepreneurial mindset makes complete and utter sense. So I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to come on to Unfiltered today with me and having a conversation. Really, really appreciate it. Very much enjoyed it, Maija. So thank you so much. And wishing you a wonderful rest of 404 day. I'll ask you the question I was just about to ask you off camera. But so thank you again, Han, and we'll see you really soon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. This was really fun.
Unfiltered. Like you're in another world, like you zone out. You know what I'm saying?